Our panelists are going to be speaking both languages. Los panelistas van a estar hablando los dos idiomas. So I'm hoping that people understand, so that if you need translation, please let us know. My name is Lourdes Garcia. I am with A Call to Action on Puerto Rico. Welcome to our forum on Puerto Rico, colonialism and the neoliberal agenda. We have a very good panel here with us today. One of them is still in traveling, Natasha Bannan. She's on her way. We're going to begin today with the compañera Mercedes Martinez, the president of the Federation of the Puerto Rican Teachers of Puerto Rico, la Federación de Mujeres Puertorriqueñas.
First of all, I want to thank all of you for coming here, for Lulu for this invitation, a call for action, for having us this night. We want to start by saying, according to the theme, that capitalism is no way of life. And in the Federación de Maestros de Puerto Rico, which is the union that I preside since this July of this year, so I'm recently new in this position, we are against any kind of oppression against our country and our people. So obviously independence is the only way to fight this back. We have to remind that the position of our union is that we have a $72 billion debt that was not created by our people. That debt has been raising up because we have corporate foreign companies that aren't paying no taxes in our country and have not paid for hundreds of years. So right now, if they have profited from $600 billion of earnings that they've made for tax-free benefits, they should be the ones held responsible to pay this debt. For la Federación de Maestros de Puerto Rico, we believe we have no debt. So therefore, we should not pay anything. 100 years of exploitation has been more than enough to pay that debt back. So we are not in the position to tell the government not to ask for any bankruptcy, not to renegotiate the debt, but just not pay it. It has been already paid for us. It has been paid for more than 100 years of exploitation, so we do not agree that this debt should be paid. Now, coming to the Federación was born in 1966. It's a rank and file union in our country that was set up to fight back and get better working conditions for teachers, but not only for that, but to transform the education system in what we want for our children. Because we believe in public, quality, and excellent education for our kids. And each government that has gone by has tried to punish, privatize, shut down schools, and deprive our kids of a good and quality education. As of 2003, the CODEMI leadership was the one in the executive committee of our union. Most of them have strong influence of the socialist movement. So they are very compromised with the teachers, the students, and our communities. The Federación went to strike in 2008 when Rafael Feliciano was our president. You could remember that there, the attack against public education was harder and stronger. They wanted to privatize our schools. Federación de Maestros was the exclusive representative of 45,000 teachers in our island. And the government gave us union dues, exclusive representation, and all the economical benefits. But they did not give us labor rights for our teachers. They did not give us a minimum size classrooms of 15 students. They did not guarantee the arts would be given in our classrooms, physical education, health classes, and other classes and courses that are needed for students to have a holistic and integral education. They started to fire teachers, aumentando the minutes from 50 minutes per class to 60. Before you had 7 courses. With that new law, you would have 6 courses. Obviously, it was a way of firing teachers that were needed in our classrooms. So the Federación put everything in a balance. And what was more important, the union dues or teachers' benefits and students' needs for a quality education. Obviously, we went in favor of our workers, and we went on strike for 10 days in 2008. Most of you that are familiar must remember. And that caused the union to be decertified. And 11 of its members were fired. 2 years after that, because we went on another strike when they wanted to privatize our schools, and their teacher licenses were revoked. So they did not only try to strangle us economically, leaving no union dues for the union because they decertified the union because striking is illegal for teachers in our country, but they left 11 women and men with no revenue or no source of income when they deprived them of their right to work, teaching them, revoking their licenses, and they had no right to do so. Obviously, they did this in response because the Federacion was a threat to the government. It's a rank and file union that believes that we are in class struggle and are fighting not only for a better education system for our students, but for a better life for the people in our country. So in 2010, Jesus Rivera Sanchez took the licenses. We got them back for the teachers of the Federacion. In 2012, Rafael Feliciano is one of the ex-presidents that was fired and whose license was revoked. They are still fired. 5 years have gone by, and not one public hearing has happened in favor of our teachers, so we're still waiting for that. But that has not taken away their strength, their commitment towards the education movement in our country. So they're still in the union and fighting in benefit of our students. What has the neoliberal agenda done towards the working class in Puerto Rico, specifically the teachers? Well, right now we're given another huge struggle. I must say that in 2008 we lost the union as representación exclusiva for our members, but we did gain a written stipulation by the Secretary of Education stating that no charter schools will be created. Until this day, no charter schools have been implemented in our country. So that has been a big step because public schools are still obviously public in our country. Now, 5 years later, Plan Batia, most of you must be aware of what's happened. Project number 1456 has come back to attack public education in our system. Batia is proposing to shut down more than 600 schools. He is proposing to privatize 15% of our schools. He is proposing to hire teachers with no benefits. Obviously, that will get the system pension down, because if you hire teachers with no benefits, they will not give their share to the pension retirement system. So it will collapse completely after 30 years of hard work. And teachers in Puerto Rico may have no Social Security. They don't pay Social Security, so they depend exclusively in their pension. What the teachers do, last November, different teachers union get together and we did a one-day strike. It was on the 17th of November. It was a beautiful day because teachers are fighting back. We have another Asociación de Maestros in Puerto Rico, which is a pro-government union, in parentheses, that told teachers not to go on strike with us, that told teachers to go and enter the schools while we were outside protesting. But teachers did not listen to them because teachers are suffering all the repercussions of this neoliberal agenda in their classrooms. And our parents and our students are with us. So what we did is we went on a one-day strike because we are preparing for a harder struggle. But most important of all is that this is not an attack towards the teachers. This is an attack against all the working class in our country. Law number 66 prohibits for the government to pay excess in sick days, reduces the vacation days, it eliminates merit pays, step pays, any raise on your salary. So it would impoverish every single worker in our country, and that applies to all, even the one that has a contract and the ones that don't have a contract signed with the government. So the working class needs to unite to fight back, and that's what we are doing. I'm happy to see the compañero Ángel Figueroa Jaramillo here because we have been meeting the UTIER, la Federación, and different working class unions to fight back against this government that has united to impoverish our people in our country and leave them with no quality of life. Right now, we are headed for a big fight. They want to impose a fiscal board that would manipulate all the economic in our country, the budget, all the agencies. So the governor will have no say in what's going to happen. We are totally opposed to that fiscal board or to the criolla fiscal board that he's proposing by that way. And we stand by strong saying that the debt is not payable. They have to tax the rich. They have to impose a 10% sales tax on the rich that are making 98% in profits and not paying a cent in our country to benefit our people. It has been long enough for our people to suffer the consequences and pay for what's not their problem. So I definitely say that the working class and this movement is growing up. Senator Batia is going to try to approve this plan next year. And the Federacion de Maestros is thinking and organizing the communities to strike on April. Why? Because the flexibility plan that has been approved by the federal government in our agency already stipulates that teachers will be, to strike. Teachers will be evaluated based on our students' standardized tests that make no sense, that do not measure anything but just profit, Pearson, and companies that want to make money out of our students. So if they implement Proyecto Batia, which is the same thing as the flexibility plan, in order for them to do so, they will have to give this test. Because if you give the test, you have to give 20% of the results to the teachers. You have to implement 7% of the students' results on their test to their grades. And you would categorize our schools in priority schools or transformation schools based on the test. So they can approve this law or any law, but if the tests are not given in our country, they will not be able to implement it. So they can sign the bill, they can approve the flexibility plan, and the government can do what it wants to do. But if teachers, parents, and students fight back, we are going to win this. So we have a lot of work. We would appreciate all the solidarity that we can have here, because they may have their 5 minutes of glory approving this in January, but in April they're going to have hell by the teachers, by the parents are tired of their schools to be shut down, by our students are being deprived of a quality education, and we are going to fight back. Teachers are united, and we appreciate your solidarity. Thank you. So I'm going to pass, I know I have 40 seconds, so I'm going to pass my. So thank you. I am very thankful for you guys to be here, for you coming here. And the best way that you can be in solidarity with the Puerto Rican teachers, the movement, is fighting back. Because the working class is just one working class here in New York City, there in Puerto Rico, and all around the world. The neoliberal agenda and the capitalist is taking all over, and we, as one working class, can fight back, and we can win. So we are very optimistic that this is going to change, because we believe in our people in our country that are feeling the consequences. And finally, I want to close by saying that for us, me personally, and the Federation of Teachers Caucus, which is from a rank and file called Clase, we believe in independence. We need our country to be free, but independence cannot come by itself and change just the people that govern our country. The independence has to be in favor of the working class. So we need independence with socialism. We need independence in the benefit of the working class in our country. Because independence by itself, we just change the governor, but not the system. So if we unite to fight back, we will win. Thank you.
Thank you, Mercedes. One of the striking things, and one of the reasons why we felt this activity was so important, is because of the lack of information in this country regarding what's happening in Puerto Rico. We know in broad strokes, but the day-to-day, how this is affecting our people, there seems to be a blackout. They are not putting this. And so when we hear directly from somebody like Mercedes, and then when we're going to hear from our compañero Ángel in a little while, we get to understand what it means to be besetted, but it means to be attacked by this fiscal crisis, this colonial crisis, not just in general terms, but in the day-to-day life of our people over there. On the other hand, it also gives them in Puerto Rico an opportunity to see how we are responding, what we are doing, how we believe in them, and how we need to support them, because Puerto Rico is isolated. In the same way that we have no news over here, they have no news about what we're doing here unless we go out and protest. So it is very critical that we not only sit here and listen to these presentations, but take note of what they're telling us. They need our solidarity and our support in Puerto Rico.
Right. Solidarity.
I want to introduce next our next speaker, Nelson Denis, who will be has written a book, as you all know, War Against All Puerto Ricans. Nelson has also been in a past life an assemblyman here in New York. And Nelson has been doing quite a bit of speaking about what is happening in this coming period with the inability of the Puerto Rican government to meet the debt.
It's great being here in Casabe, and it's an honor to serve to be on this panel, and somewhat humbling because these are the people that are on the front lines. Being at Casabe is fun for me because when I was an assemblyman, I would be in and out of here all the time, especially on chicken night, because the seniors they'd always call me on chicken night, say, "Hey Nelson, you have to come over." So it brings back a lot of memories. And so para los envejecientes de aquí de Casabe, saludos. It's great to see you again. This is a real pivotal time. This is really it's almost like bare knuckles. There's no margin for error. It's almost not even time to be polite anymore. This past year, I wrote, because it was the 50th anniversary of the death of Albizu Campos, I wrote a book in honor of Don Pedro, and it was called War Against All Puerto Ricans. And this war was declared by a police chief who was enforcing the economic situation in Puerto Rico, and when people complained about it, they would shoot them. And after the Rio Piedras massacre, he simply said, he called all the press to say, look, if Albizu Campos continues to agitate the sugarcane workers and other unions, there's going to be war to the death against all Puerto Ricans. And it was that simple. I mean, that's how they were rolling. And they killed people in Rio Piedras massacre, and then they killed 17 more in the Ponce massacre. And when Los Nacionalistas tried to do something about it in 1950, they bombed 2 towns, Utuado and Jayuya, arrested 3,000 Puerto Ricans, mobilized 5,000 National Guard troops, installed Public Law 53, which made it a crime to say one word, sing a song, whistle a tune, anything in favor of Puerto Rican independence or against the United States. Cantar la borinqueña, you can go to jail. Own a flag, you can go to jail. So this is the history, you know. And when some people are saying La Isla de Macondo, you know, it's for very real reason, because very often it's not what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, but what happened in Puerto Rico never happened at all. And that's how they're rolling this situation now. So I know we have very few moments here, so I'm just going to give you some of the history that I covered in the book, and then go forward very quickly. And when the United States came in 1898, Nelson Miles, the general, said that we're here to protect your lives, your property, and concede to you the blessings of enlightened civilization. Well, those blessings were few, because the very next year, Huracán San Ciriaco destroyed the island's coffee crop. $50 million were lost. Tens of thousands of people went homeless, and the United States gave no relief. Instead, the following year, in 1900, they devalued the Puerto Rican currency by 40%. That was the relief that they sent. And the year after that, they installed the Hollander Act, a steeply graduated set of property taxes that had never been seen in Puerto Rico, but were very cleverly designed to make Puerto Rican farmers start to lose their farms. And that's exactly what happened. They could only go to one source of lending. It was called the American Colonial Bank. It's perfect. And with no usury law restrictions, the farmers, they had to pay whatever the bank said. Well, they couldn't. They would default. And that's what the Colonial Bank wanted. They didn't want the loans repaid. They wanted the underlying collateral. They wanted the land. And they wanted to turn Puerto Rico, which had a diversified, self-sustaining economy, into a one-crop cash cow economy, that of sugar. And within 30 years, they did that. Within 30 years, 80% of the arable land in Puerto Rico was owned by North American banking syndicates. Now, explain to me how a country that's going to give you the blessings of enlightened civilization and protect your property owns 80% of your land within 30 years. Well, now let's go forward. Let's see how it's rolling now. We've had a red carpet from San Juan to Wall Street for the last 100 years. We've had 20-year tax abatement deals which excuse interest, dividend, and capital gains income. We have John Paulson, the guy right now, who was one of the beneficiaries of the mortgage crisis here in 2007. He's got computer tapes in Puerto Rico of homes in economic distress that are potentially going to be evicted. He's buying those computer tapes and he's helping people get evicted. He's buying those computer tapes legally. Now, he's getting a 20-year tax abatement right now, while Puerto Ricans are having to move to Orlando, Florida. So explain how that works. Tell me how that's equitable. Now we come to the debt. Well, Harry Truman once said there's lies, damn lies, and then there's statistics. Let's look at this debt. It wouldn't exist, first of all, if the Jones Act didn't exist. Because of the Jones Act, Puerto Rico can have no shipping. Because of the Jones Act, we lose 50,000 jobs. They're in Jacksonville rather than Puerto Rico. Because of that act, Puerto Ricans pay about $7 or $8 billion a year more for their consumer. ¿Qué fue? The FBI is sending trucks. Because of that Jones Act, Puerto Ricans pay roughly $7-8 billion a year more for their consumer goods products. There are more Walmarts and Walgreens per square mile in Puerto Rico than anywhere else on the planet. Those products now cost about 20%. They have a 20% price override because of the Jones Act. If the Jones Act didn't exist, if you multiply 7 or 8 billion times the 95 years, because it was installed pursuant to the Section 27 of the Merchant Marine Act in 1920, that's 95 years ago. You multiply 95 times 7 or 8 million, that's over $600 billion. We would have paid this debt 7 or 8 times over. It wouldn't exist. So number one, ¿cómo no dice que nosotros debemos dinero if you're stealing from us every year? Number two, how do you define debt? Again, lies, damn lies, and statistics. They say that Puerto Ricans that have a $20,000 per capita debt is in excess of any state. But how do you conveniently forget the federal debt of the United States, which is $18 trillion? You can't just pick you can't compare apples to oranges. You have to compare apples to colonies. The debt in the United States consists of state and federal debt. And if you add the state and federal debt, it's $60,000 per capita. That's what is owed on every person here. So let's see. If Puerto Rico is $20,000 per capita and United States is $60,000, then we should send a financial control board from Puerto Rico to the United States to help them manage their economy. But another element to consider is what's called odious debt. Odious debt is something that is illegal at its inception. That should never have that was statutorily prohibited. The Constitution of Puerto Rico prohibits any debt in excess of 15% of its gross national product. Its gross national product is about roughly 104 million. It was over the past year. So 15% of that would be about 16 or 17 billion. Well, right now, we have a $72 billion debt that is wildly in excess. So in other words, that debt is unconstitutional. So maybe we should let the politicians and the Wall Street firms that entered into that debt pay it, because the citizens of Puerto Rico had nothing to do with it. So again, there's all these elements. But we're in a situation now where, like FDR once had some lobbyists, they came to him and he said, you guys have convinced me that you're right. Now go out and make me do it. The problem is you have to make them do it. And Puerto Rico is in a situation where it's a colony. And so now it's one thing. It's no longer a debating society. We can't have Pedro Pierluisi putting up his you have to forgive me, but his weak ass 870 House Resolution 870, and then 10 months later is complaining about saying, oh, we should have independence. First of all, he's posturing because he knows that he knew that was going to happen from the start, and now he's just trying to get some sort of street cred by saying I prefer independence to this, because what he's doing he's saying we're the UNCOLA. We're not the PPD. We're the PNP. And at least we didn't screw your island. We just kind of like, whatever. So now we're at a point where if you think about it, 1952 was a political checkmate when they put in this Commonwealth status, and it convinced the United Nations that at the Decolonization Committee that Puerto Rico wasn't a colony. It worked well because it was during the Cold War, and the United States could ill afford to have a colony when it was fighting against Russia and trying to be the leader of the free world. Well, we're in this situation again, except in 1952 was a political checkmate, and this is an economic checkmate. What they are doing right now is those hedge funds don't want that debt repaid. They want to turn Puerto Rico into an ATM. They want the underlying physical infrastructure. They want the public schools, the prisons, the highways, the water supply, the electricity. PREPA already has an RFP out with a 4.5 cent rate hike attached as a corporate inducement to all the bidders. Well, right now the kilowatt hour is about 24 cents per kilowatt hour. What I pay here is about 8 cents. Puerto Ricans are paying 3 times per kilowatt hour for their electricity than we are here. So we're at a point, I know that I don't have, overtime, but I got 40 seconds left. I just read the bill from the Senate that is going to propose the Financial Control Board. This will be the governor, banker, judge, jury, and prosecutor of Puerto Rico. If we allow this to happen, there will be no Puerto Rican government. There will be no Puerto Rican economy. They will able to borrow without consulting the Puerto Rican government and with no liability for the United States. And then they can leave that debt. They can do if the Puerto Rican government has been corrupt, these guys can do it even better, and then they can walk away from it. So I wrote in my website, waragainstallpuertoricans.com. That's not a plug because it's free. You can go on that website and see what I wrote. I immediately read the entire bill, and I put it out there, and the Angelo Falcon also reprinted it. Please be aware that right now they're arresting people in Puerto Rico. They should have arrested them years ago, but they arrest them now because it's all happening all at once. We're going to owe $947 million on January 1st. The FBI is arresting people, and they're trying to shove this down our throat. It's really slick. It's like a shock doctrine that they're trying to apply. But we need to be aware, and we need to support these unions because they're in the front lines.
Thank you, Nelson. I want to let people know that when we finish with all the presentations, we're going to have a session of questions and answers. So please keep notes of whatever it is you need more. Our speakers will be able to elaborate on any point that they've made that you have questions about. Luis, we're going to do a very brief little movie that we think you'll enjoy. Do you need us to disappear?
Just move this way.
Yeah, we just doesn't want us in the way. While we're... Tú me desconectaste. While we're waiting on this, folks, there's food in the back, little things to pick out if you want to, and water, etc. Public service announcement.
Voy a apagarla para ahorrar batería. Ya sabes. I don't know if it's gonna work.
Mira, díselo a Daniel.
Era para, porque la apagué para ahorrar batería. No, tráemelo para acá. Daniel. Aquí otra vez. Ok, está bien. ¿Esto está prendido? ¿Está prendido? ¿Está bien? Sí, el botoncito.
Espaldas al silencio. Me dio de espaldas al silencio congelado en los ojos de la sombra. Como niño que no logró cruzar la calle llena de metales en ambas direcciones. Como túnel que no sabes cuándo termina, pues no tiene luz en ninguno de los extremos, porque hasta la luna es el primero que plantó bandera con las estrellas que se robó del cielo. El dueño siempre ausente, porque entramos en la guerra hasta matar el posible abrazo y quedarnos inmóviles
Como dijo el artista, coño justicia, coño libertad. Tenemos ahora a la compañera Natasha Bannan, presidenta del National Lawyers Guild, que nos va a hablar un poco de algunos de los esquemas legales que está ahora afectando a Puerto Rico.
Bueno. Muy buenas noches. Les voy a hablar más en inglés que español, pero quizá un poquito de Spanglish al final. Así nos entenderemos anyway, ¿verdad? So my apologies for being late. I'm sorry that I missed what I'm sure was an excellent presentation. I caught the end of it. And I'm going to speak a little bit about a different perspective, a different lens on the crisis, the economic crisis, which is from the realm of international law and human rights. I'm a human rights attorney, and the perspective that I bring to this issue is from that lens. And we've heard a lot about the impact of the economic crisis, the human impact of the economic crisis, and a lot of the remedies that are being sought in domestic forums, mainly in federal forums, from Congress, from the Treasury Department and Obama administration, now in the Supreme Court. But we haven't really heard or spoken about what is the morality and the legality of the debt under international legal principles. And there's one principle in particular, which Nelson briefly spoke about, which is called odious debt. That's applicable in the case of Puerto Rico. Odious debt comes from the realm of transitional justice, which is when, which is really in post-conflict societies, when one country that's been governed by a dictatorship, for example, cedes authority to another sovereign, to another government. And in that transition, that prior dictatorship accumulated debt for his own benefit, for some odious means, for some unjust means at the expense of the people. And so the new government that comes in, presumably democratically elected, shouldn't have to bear the burden of repaying a debt that was not accumulated for the benefit of the people, but rather for that own person's interest. The context is a little bit different in Puerto Rico, but applicable, because instead of it being debt accumulated from one state to another state, for example, it's from private creditors. However, it's still made odious because the considerations of whether a debt is odious or not is whether the people in fact benefited from the accumulation of that debt, whether the debt was incurred under some subjugated or imposed regime, and whether the creditor engaged in known risky financial transactions, right? Knew that they assumed an at-risk transaction because presumably they were dealing with some shady head of state. All of that fits Puerto Rico in a different context. Obviously, the debt, the $72 billion debt, which is more than the gross national product of the island, was not accumulated for the benefit of Puerto Rico. Despite arguments that it was used to keep the government running, we've seen the last 10 and 20 years the economic decline to now collapse of the island under the weight of that debt. The forced migration that's been a result of the economic policies that really stepped up under the previous governor, Fortuño, and the austerity measures that started to begin to be imposed under the pretext of having to deal with the debt. The cuts to public employees, the layoffs, the cuts to public services, the extremely high unemployment rate on the island, the increase in sales taxes and in taxes on people, and the decrease in corporate taxes, all are results of the weight of that debt on the government. It can be argued that the public, in fact, has accrued no benefit besides a barely operational functional government that's barely capable of meeting its basic needs, and yet is now owes more than it collectively produces and than the country produces. In addition, the creditors knew that they were engaging in high-risk financial transactions when they engaged in this, particularly in the last several years when Puerto Rico's credit was downgraded to junk bond status. And creditors continuously started to buy bonds. And the reason that they knew they were engaging in high-risk transactions was because they charged higher interest rates, which is what you do when you have a risky transaction, so that you can ensure that you recover on that investment. They charge higher interest rates for higher risk debts, which shows an intentionality and a willingness to engage in high risk transactions at the expense of the people of Puerto Rico. And so this debt that was really forced upon by a private sector is now being called public debt. And the public is now being presumed to have to bear the burden and expense of paying that debt back. And they're paying it back not only financially, but with their lives, with the separation of their families, with this forced migration that's occurring, hundreds of thousands of people that are leaving. And the context of this that's really key for what makes this particularly odious is the colonial status of Puerto Rico. Because the political relationship of the colony to the United States is what has allowed this economic regime to take place. Because of a set of laws that include the fact that Puerto Rico's constitution, when it was drafted, requires that the island pay back its private creditors before it can pay its public debt. Our constitution, the constitution of this country does not have that. Most constitutions do not have that. It is required to pay back private investors before it can pay back its own people or pay its own people, right? Then you have a series of federal laws like the Jones Act that disproportionately and discriminately apply to Puerto Rico in ways that they don't apply to other states or colonies or territories. Puerto Rico receives the overwhelming burden of that law by having to pay almost $500 million extra each year to import food that it's had to stop from producing. Now 90% of its food is imported, so that it can fill up those Walmarts and Walgreens and stores. And Puerto Rico has no control over its economy and over its ability to decide what its own economic priorities and policies should be. That the colonial status of Puerto Rico also not only limits its ability to engage in markets, domestic or international, which could alleviate its debt, making it more odious, but it also limits the remedies, right? Because it has absolutely no control over its economy, no control over its borders, over its airspace, over the ships, over its customs, has no access to international financial markets or regional development banks like Mercosur or other banks that could give it more favorable interest rates to loan. It has no ability to determine economic priorities and fund them appropriately. It's excluded from federal protections like bankruptcy, and I'm sorry if you already went over that, bankruptcy law. And when it tried to pass its own domestic response to that last year, the quiebra criolla, which is a domestic version of the bankruptcy law, to allow it to restructure only part of its debt that specifically deals with the electric authority, right? Out of $72 billion of debt, this would have only dealt with about $9 billion of debt. The same day that it passed the law, several of the hedge funds filed suit saying that that law was unconstitutional, that Puerto Rico had absolutely no right to try to engage in a restructuring of its debt, and that it had to pay back every single penny because the creditors have made it very clear that they're not interested in renegotiating the debt. And of course, there's a federal court in Puerto Rico, and the federal court governs for issues like this, has jurisdiction over the island. And so the political reality of Puerto Rico has led the island to have no choice but to engage in extremely high risk financial transactions to be able to try to continuously provide most basic services for the people of Puerto Rico. And it's limited its ability to remedy it as well. This year, earlier, the United Nations Decolonization Committee, which holds an annual hearing on Puerto Rico and whose resolutions form part of what's called customary international law, the same way that odious debt does in these principles, they form part of this larger body of international law that shape how countries are bound by their international legal obligations. The UN Decolonization Committee's annual resolution that specifically talks about the colonial status of Puerto Rico included the fact that the island's lack of economic sovereignty and its inability to deal with the high unemployment, particularly in the forced migration, is a direct result of its colonial status. Ultimately, as we all know, the solution to the economic crisis is a political solution, not just an economic solution. But it really requires us dealing head-on with the colonial status of Puerto Rico, and that is a conversation that's really governed by international legal principles and human rights principles. Y ya me cortaron.
Our next speaker is compañero Ángel Jaramillo, president of the UTIER, who will be able to follow up on the other aspect of the trade union work that is being done in Puerto Rico and the struggles of the workers of Puerto Rico.
Antes que nada, muchas gracias por la invitación. Yo voy a comenzar a darle un giro un tanto distinto para que puedan visualizar y valorar la importancia de la lucha que se tiene que dar desde aquí de Nueva York.
Nuestro apoyo.
Nosotros vamos a hablar de varias presentaciones. Una muy interesante que hizo el doctor Julio César Gambina, que la deuda es un problema global, y van a entender por qué la importancia de la lucha desde aquí. El doctor Julio César Gambina es un doctor en economía de Argentina y que trabajó en la reestructuración de la deuda de Bolivia y de Ecuador. Él decía que la deuda, o dice que la deuda es un problema estructural. Especialmente la deuda pública ha sido un mecanismo constitutivo del sistema capital en este proceso. El fenómeno de la deuda, del endeudamiento, interviene en los procesos de la crisis y por eso con la crisis crece la deuda pública. También dice, y esto es bien interesante este dato, que en los años 70 la deuda apareció como un problema de los países empobrecidos y del tercer mundo. Mas, sin embargo, hoy la deuda pública no recae en los países del tercer mundo. El país de mayor deuda pública del mundo son los Estados Unidos. También dentro de la crisis crece el endeudamiento del sector privado y muchas veces excluimos que ese sector privado es el individuo, que es parte de ese endeudamiento. Y todo conlleva los llamados ajustes fiscales para poder cumplir con el servicio a la deuda. Y los ajustes fiscales no son otras cosas de ir reduciendo derechos sociales laborales hacia los pueblos y hacia los trabajadores. Para que tengan una idea de la magnitud de la deuda pública de Estados Unidos, la deuda de Estados Unidos pública es mayor que la deuda en conjunto de los países de la Unión Europea, de Japón y del Reino Unido. En conjunto, vuelvo y repito, la deuda de Estados Unidos es mayor por sí sola que la deuda de la Unión Europea, el Reino Unido y Japón. El incremento de la deuda pública en los países latinoamericanos ha subido de 126.000 millones en la década de los 80 a 577.000 millones en el 2012. La deuda de Estados Unidos es de 15.239.000 millones de dólares. La deuda de Estados Unidos, y la que le sigue en países soberanos es la de Francia, de unos 2.346.000 millones de dólares. Ya ustedes podrán visualizar el endeudamiento que tiene Estados Unidos. Miren qué interesante. El año 2000, el mundo entero le debía a Estados Unidos. En el 2013, Estados Unidos le debe el mundo entero. El mayor acreedor es China, pero también es interesante que en Latinoamérica está México, Colombia, Brasil, Perú y Chile. Dentro de ese proceso se ha hablado aquí de la deuda odiosa. El Centro de Auditar la Deuda, de abolición de la deuda del tercer mundo establece que en Latinoamérica el 52% es deuda odiosa. Los gastos, el servicio a la deuda que los países latinoamericanos, y estoy dando este marco latinoamericano porque Puerto Rico no está excluido de ese proceso y por eso nadie ha querido por parte de auditar la deuda de Puerto Rico. El servicio a la deuda de Argentina es de 9.6 mil millones de dólares, más sin embargo se destina a la educación 1.8 mil millones de dólares. Eso del Producto Ingreso Bruto. Ahora bien, es importante también saber algo de Puerto Rico, del punto de vista de que siempre se dice que Puerto Rico, sin los Estados Unidos, no puede desarrollarse su economía. La deuda privada de Puerto Rico se estima en unos 50.000 millones de dólares, que excede el Producto Ingreso Bruto. La deuda total pública de Puerto Rico, porque se habla de unos 72.000 millones de dólares, y es mucho más, porque ahí no se incluyen los municipios. Es de 167.846 millones de dólares. Esa es la deuda pública de Puerto Rico, incluyendo la privada también. Se dice que Puerto Rico depende de los Estados Unidos, pero los datos dicen totalmente lo contrario. Puerto Rico en el sistema colonial que vive tiene que comprar en productos y servicios, bienes y servicios, unos 22.600 millones al año. Se llevan las compañías foráneas unos 34.000 millones de dólares al año. Y la Marina Mercante se estima que se paga sobre 1.500 millones de dólares al año por encima de cualquier otra marina mercante. Mas, sin embargo, las transferencias en moneda hacia Puerto Rico se calculan unos 13.530 millones de dólares, de los cuales 8.902 millones son transferencias devengadas. En palabras más sencillas, son las aportaciones que hacen los puertorriqueños a través del Seguro Social, Medicare y esas aportaciones. Al gobierno se le asigna 2.700 millones al año, lo cual se divide en 1.923 millones en programas de asistencia social y el resto en ayudas al gobierno. Ahora vamos a hablar de la Autoridad de Energía Eléctrica. La energía, el que controla la energía tiene el poder. Las guerras del mundo se hacen por energía. Petróleo, gas, carbón, nuclear. La energía mueve el mundo. Por lo tanto, la Autoridad de Energía Eléctrica es parte de ese mundo que los acreedores interesan manejar y controlar. Para que tengamos idea de la Autoridad de Energía Eléctrica, de la prepa que le dicen, la Autoridad de Energía Eléctrica controla el 50% de los abastos de agua del país. La Autoridad de Energía Eléctrica tiene la fibra óptica más grande del Caribe para las comunicaciones y la que tiene las 3 conexiones a los Estados Unidos de comunicación. Se proyecta construir el puerto de gas en Salinas, que proyecta llevar gas a las Islas Vírgenes pequeñas como un desarrollo incluyendo la industria puertorriqueña y obviamente la energía. Podemos saber ya la importancia de la Autoridad de Energía Eléctrica para los que quieren controlar el diario vivir de los puertorriqueños y puertorriqueñas. El modelo que se quiere establecer de gobernanza y financiero es el modelo que se va a seguir a nivel central. El proyecto de ley que radicaron hace semanas atrás para que fuera aprobado por la legislatura del país como un sello de goma de los acreedores y los bonistas, no es otra cosa, y lo voy a resumir bien sencillamente, es perpetuar el negocio de endeudamiento del país, con la única diferencia que va a establecer un mecanismo estructural de garantizar el cobro a la deuda, creando una corporación tipo Cofina para cobrar y pagar a los acreedores. Los bonistas no viven de administrar negocios. Los bonistas viven de prestar dinero y rescatar grandes ganancias. Y ese es el modelo que quieren hacer la Autoridad de Energía Eléctrica. La única forma que nosotros tenemos para poder enfrentar este modelo es que todos los puertorriqueños y puertorriqueñas que viven en el Puerto Rico y los que viven fuera de Puerto Rico, que le digo aquí con mucho respeto, creo que en este momento histórico tienen mayor carga, porque ustedes están accesibles al centro del mercado mundial. Es la única forma de enfrentar y confrontar al imperio frente a este proceso. Si nosotros comenzamos a desmantelar el modelo económico en Puerto Rico, comenzamos a avanzar aún más en la liberación de nuestro país. Decía un pensador, y termino con esto, que yo no tengo miedo de los que nos quieren comprar, ahora yo tengo miedo de los que nos quieren vender. Y nos quieren vender son el gobierno del país. Los 2 principales partidos que por 60 años han gobernado y han entregado el pueblo de Puerto Rico a los Estados Unidos. Y ahora más con lo que ocurrió en el día de antier, donde calladamente, con una sola crítica soslayada, han aceptado en la práctica la imposición de una junta de ajuste fiscal, que es lo que nos llevaría a la década de los años 20 del siglo pasado. Muchas gracias, y más adelante estaremos hablando sobre otros temas.
Gracias, compañero Ángel. The last speaker, but certainly not least, Manuel Melendez Lavandero, speaking on behalf of Call to Action on Puerto Rico. Manuel.
Muy buenas noches, compañeras y compañeros. A nombre de Call to Action voy a emitir estas palabras o esta declaración. El Call to Action en Puerto Rico tiene su primer encuentro la tarde del 13 de julio del 2015, y la convocatoria que sirvió de marco para congregarnos ese día lee como sigue. Justa, número 1, que la deuda es impagable. 2, que en todo caso son las corporaciones extranjeras que operan en nuestro país las que nos deben pues en los últimos 20 años se han llevado sobre 600.000 millones de dólares en ganancias de capital sin tributar por los mismos, y siendo un 10% de ese dinero suficiente para pagar la ya impagable deuda. Tercero, que el costo social del aumento en el IBU, la reducción de jornada laboral, la reducción de los servicios de educación y salud al pueblo, eliminan la eliminación de conquistas laborales, el desmantelamiento del sistema de retiro, entre otras medidas recesivas, van en deterioro de la calidad de vida y del mismo desarrollo estratégico de la economía del país, y no sería una solución al problema. Cuarto, que la situación de subordinación política de Puerto Rico como colonia de Estados Unidos atraviesa el problema, siendo la independencia la ficha de destranque para crear las posibilidades de llegar a una solución beneficiosa para nuestro país. Quinto, que el informe de Ann Kruger no debe ser guía para la solución, pues ella proviene de aquellas instituciones financieras mundiales que generaron la política neoliberal, de las cuales algunos de nuestros países latinoamericanos ahora se han liberado mediante el desarrollo de políticas económicas soberanas que priman el beneficio social colectivo por encima del lucro avaro del capital corporativo y financiero. Y sexto, que el problema de fondo es el estatus colonial de Puerto Rico, y a ese respecto la resolución de las Naciones Unidas adoptada el 22 de junio del 2015 plantea que la condición de subordinación política impide tomar decisiones soberanas para atender los graves problemas económicos y sociales de Puerto Rico. Es por eso que sugerimos que a la brevedad posible convocar a los activistas sociales y políticos boricuas en Nueva York y pensemos en un plan de lucha y solidaridad, siendo esta la meca de Wall Street, del capital financiero y símbolo del capitalismo mundial. Es mucho lo que podemos hacer y mover en términos de la denuncia y la opinión pública. En este momento histórico único se presenta la oportunidad de educar, denunciar y avanzar en la causa de la lucha por la independencia y la justicia social para Puerto Rico. Cierra nuestra cita. A partir de este momento y durante los pasados meses hemos desarrollado varias actividades que han venido a establecer la presencia de Call to Action en Puerto Rico, tanto en Nueva York y en otras ciudades como Newark y Filadelfia, y ahora en Massachusetts. También hemos desarrollado contactos con organizaciones patrióticas en Puerto Rico, como por ejemplo el PIB, la Mesa de Diálogo Independentista y el Frente Socialista, entre otras. Entre las actividades realizadas se destacan piquete frente a Paulson, un piquete frente a las oficinas de PRAFA en septiembre pasado, una carta al Papa Francisco cuando estuvo de visita en Nueva York, la participación en la parada puertorriqueña de Newark y la demostración que efectuamos el pasado 2 de diciembre en la Meca en Wall Street. Representantes de Call to Action en Puerto Rico hemos participado en varias entrevistas radiales, conferencias de prensa, foros y conversatorios. El día 14 de noviembre tuvimos un retiro de planificación estratégica donde se reafirman esos planteamientos que sirvieron de base a la convocatoria inicial como la visión de Call to Action. Además, en ese retiro acordamos como nuestros objetivos inmediatos, número 1, continuar educando sobre la situación colonial y de subordinación política de Puerto Rico con respecto a Estados Unidos y de la necesidad de la independencia para nuestro país. Segundo, examinar la crisis en Puerto Rico y su impacto en la clase trabajadora y desposeída en Puerto Rico. Por eso tenemos también este seminario en el día de hoy. Tercero, alertar y hacer presente el asunto de la crisis en Puerto Rico en nuestras comunidades, en la clase trabajadora y al público estadounidense en general. Cuarto, establecer contactos y coordinación con organizaciones y grupos afines en Puerto Rico, en los Estados Unidos, particularmente con los hermanos y hermanas latinoamericanos. Y quinto, acordamos continuar con las actividades de acción directa, tales como las demostraciones en Wall Street, frente a las oficinas de fondos buitres y frente a PRAFA, entre otros. Entendemos que para poder desarrollar nuestro trabajo se hace necesario actualizar nuestro análisis y de una manera esquemática planteamos lo siguiente. Sobre los partidos políticos en Puerto Rico. Los partidos coloniales PNP y PPD, con sus programas y todos sus dirigentes, son responsables del descalabro por negligencia crasa, mala administración abuso de poder, corrupción, malversación y hurto de fondos públicos, falta de sensibilidad a las necesidades del pueblo, sumado a una actitud sumisa y de entrega a los grandes intereses de las agencias financieras, los bancos y las élites corporativas. Si bien puede ser cierto que comienzan a ser vistos con sospecha a los ojos de la opinión pública, no hay todavía un cuestionamiento a su control hegemónico y continúan manejando el escenario político como si aquí no ha pasado nada. Y es por eso que uno de nuestros planteamientos de Call to Action, nuestros planteamientos estratégicos, es que hay que impugnar la legitimidad y la capacidad de ambos partidos coloniales como actores para resolver la crisis. Sobre los ataques a los trabajadores, entendemos que la clase trabajadora ha sido y continuará siendo impactada, agredida en la medida que se continúen aprobando legislación destinada a desmantelar el derecho laboral. Aunque se habla principalmente del sector público, el ataque es generalizado contra el conjunto de la clase trabajadora y el movimiento sindical. Las medidas de ajuste que a sus anchas vendrá a imponer la Junta Federal Fiscal van dirigidas a eliminar aumentos salariales, convenios colectivos, los bonos de Navidad y cualesquiera otros similares. Sin lugar a dudas, el recorte de presupuestos a las agencias implicará el cierre de plazas de trabajo y despido de empleados. Durante años, los sectores obreros, de manera responsable, vienen haciendo propuestas para mejorar la capacidad de recaudo del gobierno, enfrentar la corrupción y formas de hacer recortes en gastos superfluos. Estas propuestas de los trabajadores han caído, y las trabajadoras han caído en oídos sordos, prevaleciendo los intereses de los bonistas y de los capitalistas. Los sindicatos, como instrumento de lucha de los trabajadores, se juegan en esta etapa la vida misma. Se impone como tarea inmediata del movimiento obrero y sus sectores de vanguardia desarrollar estrategias de lucha y resistencia para preservar los derechos conquistados y frenar la embestida del capital. Sobre las corporaciones foráneas, vemos cómo, aprovechándose de la incertidumbre y el descalabro existente, compañías como Walmart en estos momentos presentan una demanda contra el gobierno por discrimen tributario. Ahora resulta que están pagando mucho en impuestos y amenazan con cerrar sus operaciones y dejar en la calle a miles de empleados y empleadas. Esto es una pequeña muestra de la avaricia sin límites y del plan de saqueo y extorsión que utilizan las corporaciones extranjeras en nuestro país. Son aquellas, las mismas, que se llevan sobre 32.000 millones de dólares al año en ganancias de capital sin reinvertir en nuestra economía para continuar en su afán desmedido de lucro. La Junta Federal Fiscal, en Call to Action en Puerto Rico, hemos hecho un planteamiento claro desde hace varias semanas de que un resultado directo del cabildeo en Washington para que se adjudique la ley de quiebras, además de que muy seguramente no será aprobado, creará las bases para la imposición de una Junta Federal Fiscal en cualquiera de sus modalidades. Y esta Junta tendrá poderes para determinar el presupuesto gubernamental, asignar partidas y hacer recortes en los presupuestos particulares de las agencias de gobierno, lo cual tendrá un impacto directo sobre los empleados, los convenios colectivos y el servicio a la ciudadanía. Dicha Junta tendrá como tarea principal la protección de los intereses de los bonistas, o sea, que su enfoque será el pago de la deuda. Las recetas de Ann Kruger y todos los asesores de los fondos buitres serán implementadas en todo rigor. Al no ser estos ni puertorriqueños ni funcionarios electos, los miembros de la Junta no van a pestañear en dictar decisiones. Como manera de establecer su legitimidad, plantean que la legislatura puertorriqueña tendrá que aprobar la legislación viabilizando la Junta Federal Fiscal. El gobernador tendrá que firmar la misma. O sea, hay que firmar un acta de rendición y entrega del país a los señores del capital imperial. Quedan 2 minutos. El movimiento independentista y la izquierda. Como hemos señalado desde el principio, este es un momento histórico y presenta la oportunidad de educar, denunciar y avanzar en la causa de la lucha por la independencia y la justicia social para Puerto Rico. Los independentistas llevamos mucho tiempo dispersos y este momento es urgente forzar unidad en la acción. Es algo que dicta el sentido común, además de que lo exige el momento histórico. Las contradicciones imperio-colonia comienzan a manifestarse y a profundizarse. Baste señalar el mensaje del comisionado residente Jaime Pierluisi al decir que prefiere la independencia a continuar bajo el yugo de la relación colonial. Esto independientemente se lo dice como bluff, ¿verdad? La instauración de la Junta Federal Fiscal ciertamente vendrá a profundizar esa grieta, pues será responsable directo de las drásticas medidas que adopte para pagar a los bonistas en prejuicio de los mejores intereses de nuestro pueblo. Pero solo si generamos la dirección política, canalizamos la indignación del pueblo y señalamos el camino de la resistencia y de la independencia con justicia social como salida digna, posible y necesaria, es que podremos provocar ese cambio en la correlación de fuerza que proponemos. Debemos insistir de muchas y variadas maneras en esa necesidad de unidad patriótica y revolucionaria. Hay una estrofa de la canción Aniversario de Pablo Milanés que dice: uno detrás del otro, refiriéndose a los años, me han llevado a pensar que habrá una lucha larga y la escogimos, pero por largo se tuercen los caminos y hay una sola forma de pelear. Nada que consolide al enemigo, todo lo que nos lleve a la unidad. Y pienso que esa debe ser nuestra consigna. Nada que consolide al enemigo y todo lo que nos lleve a la unidad. Hay que desarrollar un sector de lucha social compacto, definido y con estrategias para forzar un cambio en la correlación de fuerzas. ¿Qué hacer? El dirigente histórico del Partido Independentista Puertorriqueño, compañero Rubén Berríos, ha planteado en varias ocasiones durante este año que de una manera sencilla la necesidad de crear una presión necesaria para crearle una crisis al imperio en Puerto Rico. Y para lograr esto entiendo que hace falta varias cosas. Primero, continuar generando y aumentar en cantidad y capacidad las movilizaciones, los piquetes, las acciones de desobediencia civil que expresen su rechazo a las políticas de austeridad y a la eliminación de derechos laborales y exigir un alto al chantaje de las casas financieras. Hay que mover esa energía social a cuestionar a los bancos, a las casas financieras, a Wall Street y a la relación política imperio-colonia. Además, hay que cuestionar a los partidos PNP y PPD y adjudicarles la responsabilidad de la situación actual y su complicidad con el gran capital. Cuestionar su legitimidad, cuestionar su moral. Si son parte del problema, ¿cómo permitir que sean parte de la solución? Otro punto, trabajar la opinión pública internacional que tiene el ojo puesto en Puerto Rico, en Grecia y en España para que preste atención a nuestra lucha anticolonial. Además, hacer buen uso de la solidaridad internacional con el derecho de Puerto Rico a la autodeterminación e independencia. Otro punto, impulsar las variadas propuestas generadas desde el independentismo sobre las alternativas para enfrentar la crisis política y económica. Esto en materia de agricultura, comercio, sistema de educación de calidad y gratuito, sistema de salud universal, cero leyes de cabotaje, transportación colectiva, protección y preservación de recursos naturales, educar en fin sobre el nuevo modelo de desarrollo social al que aspiramos. Hay que visualizar el futuro porque solo así podremos nosotros y nosotras saber para dónde vamos. Tenemos que mirarnos en los espejos y en los ejemplos de nuestros hermanos latinoamericanos y sus logros alcanzados. Muy particularmente y sin miedo, mirarnos en el ejemplo de Cuba, que emerge como potencia en áreas de educación, medicina, turismo, cultura, agricultura, relaciones internacionales y solidaridad, muy a pesar del bloqueo y todas las agresiones de que han sido objeto. Un país que se construye con tesón, disciplina, planificación, estrategia y con el ser humano como centro de su proyecto social. Podemos seguir hablando de que han entrado en crisis la relación imperio-colonia, pero si no definimos un plan de lucha que tenga como objetivo político, estratégico, la lucha por la hegemonía y la toma del poder, estaríamos desaprovechando una coyuntura histórica única. Cuando nuestro pueblo llegue a entender la caducidad de la relación imperio-colonia, llegará sin problema a reconocer la necesidad de la ruptura con lo viejo para que nazca lo nuevo. Y esto solo lo lograremos con organización, voluntad y lucha.